Where's the widespread political opposition in the Middle East where they have no rights? They're not allowed. The thing is you presuppose that women will be allowed to go out. If that's true, why the hell did you need feminism?
Because I don't think that it was about violence. I think that it was about a lack of political rights.
Both of these things cannot be true at the same time. This is where we come to what we call Schrödinger's feminist, which is I'm a strong, empowered woman, but also a victim at the same exact time. And it can't really be both. Have patriarchy. If that's the case, that you're appealing to it anyway in order to enforce your rights inside of it, why not just submit to patriarchy? How are you relegating women to the home if the most important societal job we can give them is motherhood? How is it a demotion? How is it
even a gilded cage is a cage. Like if a woman doesn't want to do.
All right, so this college feminist walks into what she probably thought was going to be a friendly debate about women's rights and equality. And Andrew Wilson just absolutely dismantles her entire worldview in like 10 minutes. I'm talking complete philosophical destruction. She starts off confident, talking about egalitarianism and political power. And by the end, she's literally admitting that motherhood is the most important job in society, while simultaneously calling it a gilded cage. Like, do you hear yourself? This is what happens when your ideology is built on contradictions and you run into someone who actually knows how to think. Watch how fast this falls apart. Let's get into it.
If it is true that men can, by use of force, and I think most women know this, could do this, why, if they decided to, do you think that women would, what do you think they could do about it? Take to the street with their little signs and say, please don't?
But I don't, to me that sounds like you're saying it would be an act of violence. How are men going to take away women's rights without violence?
If men collectively tomorrow say women have no more rights, what are the options left to women?
I mean, legal, political exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, you say men are stronger. They could exercise violence against women to take their rights away,
They
right?
may not need to exercise any violence. All they may need to do is just say, you no longer have the rights, and women really just can't do anything about it. They could maybe collectivize with signs, but what happens if they're just ignored or laughed at or scoffed or mocked, and they can't really take violence to men? So in political action, right, there is always what is called the violent alternative, and men can always appeal to that alternative. It's a terrible thing. I'm not advocating for that. I'm giving a descriptor for what is true. This is something which can be appealed to for men, but only for men. Women can only do small scale. So even in kind of the craziest feminists you can think of, the best they were able to do is like send some boom booms in the mail and this kind of thing. But they couldn't really push back against a structure of strength. It wasn't really possible for them to do. You see the voting gap as it begins to widen, as men become more right-wing and women more left-wing. What happens eventually if what is considered the patriarchy has been pushed against just decides one day, no more rights for women?
I think in that case, there would be political opposition, and I think there would be widespread collective political opposition from women. And if you say that's futile because men can just...
Where's the widespread political opposition in the Middle East where they have no rights? They're not allowed. The thing is you presuppose that women will be allowed to go out and have picket signs, or presuppose that women can go out and protest, presuppose that women will still be able to have the same functions they have now if men collectively say no. And I'm telling you, I don't think that that's the case. Everything down from the husband inside of the home to the boyfriend inside of the home to the actual structure of government, all enforcing collectively, or even a small collection, maybe 10%, I think women can't really do anything.
I mean, I would agree they can't do anything physically, but that would require men to collectively decide to use violence against women. And I don't believe that most men would be willing to use violence against women for political means.
Then if that's true, why the hell did you need feminism?
Because I don't think that it was about violence. I think that it was about a lack of political rights, if I can use that word.
Well, then, but we
Political
already have
entitlements.
we've already discerned that rights are force. So if we've discerned that rights are force, and you say that we want more rights, it means that you want to have more force.
Sure.
So then you needed feminism, right? Feminism was a way for you to have force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that social movements like collective political
But why
action
do you
can
need-
approximate
For
force
sure. But what
for
do you
women.
need force for? If you're saying that men collectively would not move against women using force, why the hell do you need force then?
I think that they would collectively move against women using force. I'm saying,
Well,
like,
then you just contradicted yourself.
I'm talking more in a political force sense. I don't think that men
What
in
is
general
political
would
force?
I think the use of, like, rights, things like that, like restricting rights, restricting mobility, disenfranchisement,
That's
things
all
like
force.
that. It's all backed up with force, but I don't think it always necessarily
Oh,
translates
no,
to a
it
one-to-one.
It is force, because absent force, law has no bite. So if somebody says it is the law that you not do X, but there's no enforcement if you break the law, is that a law?
I mean, is enforcement always violence? Like, is
Enforcement always must be backed with physical violence for a law or for any type of right, period.
maybe backed with the threat of, but do you think that all enforcement
Well,
takes place solely through the threat of physical violence? Or do you
Yes.
think there are social
No,
mechanisms?
all of it has to be backed with the physical prowess of enforcement. Otherwise, why couldn't it just be ignored?
I mean, I think that there are things beyond the threat of physical violence that can... I agree with you that the threat of physical violence is what backs the majority of our laws, but do you not think there's also a social aspect of, like, appropriateness and, like, wanting to be perceived in a certain way, wanting to keep with norms,
If you're asking
customs?
about social norms,
Yeah.
sure, but if there's a violation to a social norm absent a law, that's one of the problems we have in society now, right? Which is there's no law which prevents you from moving outside of a social norm. So if that is the case, then nothing's preventing.
Okay, so pause right here, because this is the exact moment where Andrew just cornered her into admitting the entire feminist framework is a logical impossibility. Let me break down what just happened, because this is brilliant. He forced her to admit that all political power, all rights, everything, it's all backed by force. And she agreed. She had to agree, because it's just objectively true. You can't have a law without enforcement. You can't have enforcement without the threat of physical violence. That's just reality. And then he asks the perfect follow-up. If men collectively decided tomorrow that women have no rights, what could women actually do about it? And she starts talking about political opposition and protests and signs, and he just keeps pushing. Okay, but what if they're ignored? What if nobody cares about your signs? What then? And she has no answer, because the answer is force. The answer is always force. That's what makes rights real. And women cannot, on a physical level, match that force against men. She knows it, he knows it. Everybody watching this knows it. It's not controversial. It's just biology. But here's where it gets even better. He pivots and says, okay, so if you can't match force with force, and you needed feminism to gain political power, that means you were appealing to men, to the patriarchy, to give you those rights. You were asking the system you claim to be oppressed by to protect you. You were relying on male enforcement to back up your new rights. She literally admits it. She says, I can agree with that. Dude, do you understand what she just conceded? She just agreed that feminism is entirely dependent on patriarchy, that every single feminist achievement in history was only possible because men allowed it, because men enforced it, because men used their monopoly on force to back it up. Feminism is not rebellion against the patriarchy. It's the patriarchy extending protection to women in a new form. It's the same system, just rebranded. And the funniest part? She doesn't even realize how devastating that admission is. She just keeps going, trying to argue that she doesn't like that situation, and Andrew immediately hits her with the obvious question. Then why not just submit to patriarchy? If you're appealing to it anyway, if you need it to function, if you can't exist without it, why are you pretending to fight it? She has no answer. She just says, I would rather not. Like that's an argument. That's not a rebuttal. That's just feelings. And this is the problem with modern feminism. It's all vibes. It's all, I don't like this, and it doesn't feel fair, and I want things to be different. But when you ask them to explain how it would actually work in reality, they can't, because it doesn't work. It's a fantasy. It's a cognitive dissonance loop where you want to be independent and empowered, but also protected and provided for. You want to reject male authority, but rely on male enforcement. You want equality, but only when it benefits you. Andrew called it Schrödinger's feminist. You're simultaneously a strong, empowered woman and a victim who needs systemic protection. And both cannot be true at the same time. One of those has to give. And when you force someone to pick, like Andrew just did, they always pick victim. Because that's where the social currency is. That's where the sympathy is. That's where the political power is. But it requires admitting you're not actually equal. And she just did. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that. Does feminism require patriarchy to function? Drop your thoughts below.
It's preventing you. So let's say, for instance, there's no law which says that it's illegal to go out and dig up a dead body and do a dirty deed to it. Okay? You agree that there will be people who do.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. But wouldn't it be better for us to have a law and force saying if you do this, there's going to be severe punishments for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the social norm itself is not the enforcement. It's always the force.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that. I guess I still am stuck on how that means that we can't have an egalitarian society. Okay. I guess I should ask.
You would have the illusion of egalitarianism, but you never actually have egalitarianism. That will always be a product of the mind and never a product of objective reality.
Okay. So is your view of feminism that it is pointless because there can never be egalitarianism?
Well, so you just earlier, and no offense, I'm just going to point this out so that you know, you spoke out of two sides of your mouth. You said, I don't believe that men would collectively come together to use some kind of force against women. But when I asked, why would you need feminism then? You said, well, because we need to have some kind of force to protect ourselves from the patriarchy. Well, both of these things cannot be true at the same time. This is where we come to what we call Schrödinger's feminist, which is I'm a strong, empowered woman, but also a victim at the same exact time. And it can't really be both. It has to be one or it has to be the other. So if you're a strong, empowered woman, and what it is that you want is some type of equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I think we've just discovered that that's not even a possibility. So what's really going on is you want some sort of political power, right? But you can't enforce the political power.
Well, that is, and when I say that equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I mean political power, because I don't think that men will collectively decide to use violence against women. So
they do it all over the world all the time.
Well, yes, on an individual level. I don't think collectively.
On a collective level.
Okay, so what do you think the solution to that should be for women?
Well, I think the first solution is you should understand that what you're doing is you're fighting the patriarchy by at the same time appealing to it. So if you and I can agree that force itself is political power and that force itself is always going to be monopolized by men, then you've described a patriarchal system. If that is the case and you say you want more political power, then you are actually appealing to a patriarchal system to give it to you. Because they're going to be the enforcers, right?
I can agree with that. I don't think it's good. I don't enjoy that situation.
So why not just have patriarchy? If that's the case, that you're appealing to it anyway in order to enforce your rights inside of it, why not just submit to patriarchy?
Because I mean, me personally, I would rather not. I would not like to see the outcomes from a system that works like that. I wouldn't like to see women, I guess, in general, relegated to the domestic sphere. I wouldn't like to see the levels of...
When you say domestic sphere, what do you mean?
The home, like child rearing. Me personally, I have no problem with that. That's what I see in my future because
what could be more important than that?
For me,
no, for
nothing.
For women.
I mean, for women, I think that should be up to the individual woman.
Yeah, I understand that you think. Well, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I think that the key here is not to say that is bad, but I do think that sort of socially enforcing that is the only opportunity for women is bad, because not every woman will be fulfilled by that and will be happy in that position.
What job do you think is more important in society than being a mother?
I would agree that being a mother is the most important
Then
job.
how are you relegating women to the home? If the most important societal job we can give them is motherhood, how is it a demotion? How is it
I mean, even a gilded cage is a cage. Like, if a woman doesn't want to do that,
well, but there's no,
that's relegation.
There's never been women are not forced to stay at
No,
home and give birth.
they're
And
not
they've always
forced,
been
but
able to
there's-
work. They've always been able to work.
All right, so let's talk about how this ended, because Andrew didn't just win this debate. He philosophically cornered her into defending the exact system she claims to oppose. The final exchange is perfect. He asks her, what job is more important than motherhood? And she admits, she literally says out loud, that being a mother is the most important job in society. And then, in the same breath, she calls it a gilded cage. She calls the most important societal role a cage. Do you see the problem? If motherhood is the most important job, how is it relegation? How is it oppression? How is it a demotion? You can't say something is the most valuable thing society does and then also call it imprisonment. That's not logic. That's just you trying to have it both ways. You want the respect and acknowledgement that motherhood is critical, but you also want to keep the victim narrative alive so you can claim you're being forced into it. But here's the thing, and Andrew already said this earlier in the clip. Women have never been forced to stay home. They've always been able to work. Nobody's locking women in houses. Nobody's preventing women from having careers. What feminism did was take an option that most women were already choosing and reframe it as oppression. And now we have an entire generation of women who've been gaslit into thinking that the most biologically fulfilling, socially important, and personally meaningful thing they could do with their lives is actually a trap. And you can see it in her face at the end. She's trying so hard to defend her position, but she knows she just got dismantled. She knows Andrew exposed every contradiction. She knows that everything she believes requires appealing to the system she claims to hate. And she has no response except, I would rather not. Which is not an argument. That's just an emotional preference. This is what happens when your worldview is built on resentment instead of truth. When you start from, I don't like this, and then try to reverse engineer a philosophy to justify it, you end up with feminism. You end up with contradictions stacked on top of contradictions. And when someone like Andrew comes along and actually makes you defend your claims, the whole thing collapses. So who won this? Come on, it's not even close. Andrew Wilson didn't just win. He didn't even break a sweat. This girl walked in thinking she was going to stand up for women's rights and equality, and she walked out having admitted that feminism is entirely dependent on patriarchy, that motherhood is the most important job in society, and that women cannot enforce their own political power without male protection. She basically argued his case for him. And look, I'm not saying she's dumb. I'm saying she's been fed a lie her entire life by professors, by media, by feminist influencers who make money off of keeping women angry and resentful. She probably genuinely believes this stuff, but belief doesn't make it true. And the second you put it up against someone who knows how to think clearly and argue logically, it falls apart in minutes. That's what we do here at MB. We break down these debates, we call out the contradictions, and we show you what's really going on beneath the surface. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. Drop a like if you want to see more of these breakdowns. And let me know in the comments, do you think Andrew went too hard? Or was this exactly what needed to be said? I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.